This is a story that is bound to inspire all of you. This is the story of Bill Wagner, currently coordinating producer at DIRECTV Sports, overseeing the Red Zone channel. How he got here is something amazing. It was a leap of faith he took early on, and in the face of rejection, he took a chance and it worked in his favor and has set off a chain reaction that has led to his rise in the business. We are going to talk all about it. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio and a broadcaster for the USTA. This is the On to Something podcast, and I have the pleasure of having on Bill Wagner. Bill, as someone who I've looked up to for so long, this is really a treat for me, and I can't wait to get your story out there. I want to start before all the fame and all the high profile positions came, and when you were really interested in this business and the role that your father played in setting off this dream and turning what was initially a dream into reality.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Brian. This is an absolute pleasure. I'm usually the guy behind the scenes. I'm usually the guy that's coaching the on-air talent, and I'm not used to being on the other side of the camera. So thank you for telling my story. I'm excited to tell a story. And absolutely, everything is a break. And it all started with advice from my dad. And I'll just kind of start out. I'm a kid from New York, diehard sports fan. Grew up listening to WFAN sports radio, diehard Mets fan. And when I went to University of Arizona, I had no idea what I wanted to be. I was undecided. I was enjoying college, and I joined the student radio station. And from there, of course, I joined the sports department. And from that point, I've always been a fan of FAN. And my dad, we were at the airport and we were going back to New York. And I was joking around that Steve Cohen, who at the time was a producer, Mike and the Mad Dog, he went to University of Arizona. And my dad was like, "Oh, Stevie Cohen went to Arizona." I said, "Yes, he did." And I was all excited. And then he says, "Why don't you call WFAN and call Steve Cohen, take a leap of faith and say, 'How are you doing? My name is Bill, and I go to Arizona too, and maybe you can go to FAN.'" And I laughed and I said, "Of course I'm not going to call him. I don't know him. I've never met him. What am I going to do?" And he said to me, and it was the greatest piece of advice that he's ever told me, "What's the worst thing that can happen? He doesn't answer the phone. He hangs up. He's not a nice guy. There's no reason not to try." So I called. I was nervous. I was shaking. I called FAN. The woman said, "May I ask who's calling for Steve Cohen?" I said, "Bill Wagner." Before I could even say he doesn't know me, she puts me on hold and he gets on the phone, "Cohen here." And all of a sudden, from that point on, the door opened. I talked to him. He couldn't have been nicer. He said, "Absolutely, come on down to WFAN radio. We'll grab a slice of pizza. I'll show you around." It was the greatest thing ever. And from that point on, I got an internship at WFAN. I worked on bagels and baseball with Ian Eagle and Tommy John. I worked overnights. Obviously, I met Mike and the Mad Dog, which was an absolute honor, especially for a young sports kid in New York. And after my internship was over, which was an incredible, incredible internship, I said, "Do you know anybody in Los Angeles? I'm going to be out there next summer." And they said, "Absolutely. We know a guy over at Fox Sports. They're starting a Fox Sports department." And away we went. And I got an internship at Fox Sports in 1998. And I just really honed in on what I needed to do to get to the next level and the next level. And one job led to another. And once I was out in Los Angeles, it seemed like I created my own breaks. So it was amazing. And it all started with that one phone call.
Bill Wagner is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. I want to get to the future breaks. I want to get to what you did at Fox Sports. But what do you think it was about Steve and why he was so kind to you and why there are so many people in this business who wouldn't do what he did for you? Why do you think he did that for you?
I think that's a great question. I think, for one, University of Arizona is not USC. It is not NYU. It does not create and open doors for you with internships. So you kind of create your own breaks. For one, he was just a great all-around person. So he took the time to meet with me, and we stay in touch to this day. He's now senior vice president of SiriusXM Sports. And I like to call him a good friend of mine. And we meet up at the Super Bowl every year. We have breakfast every time I'm in New York, popping over and we're grabbing lunch. And he's the ultimate mentor. And I think, and I'm sure for you, Brian, as well, there's always somebody who opened a door for you, right? And from that point on, I've been like that. I've had interns who've been from University of Arizona. I'm a mentor with the Veterans in Media, trying to get veterans a foot in the door into the media industry in Los Angeles. I just think you have to pay it forward because at the end of the day, we all got a break. Somebody opened the door for us. So why shouldn't we open it for somebody else? So to me, Steve Cohen opened that door. And I tell him that all the time. And I'll tell him till the day I die. He's a mentor and an absolute bench.
What does he say to you now, given how far you've come from the young Bill Wagner who reached out to him via the phone call, and to see how far, yeah, you've come and what you've done? What is his reaction to what he's seen from you ever since that first moment you talked to him?
Well, he's just so proud, and we've gone from I'm proud for little Billy Wagner, right? I was 20 years old, 21 years old. Now I'm 45. And I've created a niche in the industry. So for him, I mean, it makes him happy, but at the same time, we can talk now on the same level. I mean, I'll always look up to him, but we're actually talking industry. I'm not asking him advice on should I go here? I'm thinking about applying there, or what do you think of my shows? At this point, we're just two friends, but obviously without what he did for me, I don't know what I'm doing in my career. So it's really interesting on how far it's all come. Like we talked about with my dad's phone call, which we've talked about with Steve Cohen. You just never know who's going to open that door, and there's always going to be a fork in the road. And you're always going to look back on if I had stayed here or if I had only taken that job. And for him, he answered the phone. I mean, what if he was sick that day? What if he never answered? What if he never called me back and took a message? He answered the phone and he didn't let me down. So I couldn't be more excited to tell the story about Steve Cohen. Incredible human being.
In a way, it seems like, Bill, since he never let you down, you've been on this journey to never let him down, to say,
Hmm.
hey, he did this for me. Now, over the course of my career and all these years being in the business and rising the ranks, this is me showing him thank you and telling him thank you for what he did for
Right.
me. And I feel like that has to be part of your drive, Bill. And it was your drive as you went from there early on to meeting him to then going to Fox Sports. And that was another door that opened up for you.
Yep.
You got to go to the Olympics. You got to go up and close and personal with some of these athletes.
Yep.
And there was a story in there where I think that what you were doing and being in the business, where it really was like you could have easily been starstruck.
Hmm.
What was that moment like when it came to you getting to work with the basketball team in 2000 in Sydney?
Absolutely. I mean, everything, like I said, leads to another, right? So I started at Fox Sports. I was a PA, right? I'm the kid that's logging tape, the 1998 home run chase, McGuire Sosa. I'm the one who's putting out all the melt reels, replay reels of all this, right? So I'm scoring games. I'm doing grunt work, right? But I'm learning the industry. And then we created, actually, it was not we, Eric Shanks, who's now the president of Fox Sports. So he was senior vice president at the time. And he said, you know what? Fox Sports does behind the scenes of everything, right? From the ALCS, from the NFL, across the board, right? So he said, you're going to go to the ALCS, you're going to New York City, you're going to stay at a beautiful hotel. Again, I'm 23 years old. I have an XL1 Canon camera. I'm shooting behind the scenes at Yankee Stadium. I am going to Daytona and I'm interviewing drivers. I'm in the pace car. I'm doing all these fun pieces. And then they tell me at this point, you're going to the Olympics. We're sending you to Sydney. Um, you don't have any connections over there. So now I'm dealing with Adidas, Nike, trying to use their headquarters to create interviews with, doesn't matter if it's swimmers, wrestlers, anything, anybody who will sit down in front of me. I am going to do an interview. I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to send it back from Sydney back to Los Angeles. Right. And the one opportunity that I got post a long day, I think it was 8 o'clock at night or so. I'm at a bar or a restaurant, whatever you want to call it. And I'm talking to this gentleman who eventually says, what do you think of Sharif Abdul-Rahim? And I said, oh, he's a fantastic basketball player. He's great. He goes, well, I'm his agent. Would you like to interview him? And at this point, I can't remember if he's serious or not. He gave me his business card. I called him the next morning and he says, come on down to practice. I'll be there and I'll get you in. With no credential, I walk into the Team USA. There's maybe a couple Asian media, but there's nobody from the US, Europe, anybody else. Team USA is practicing. I'm watching Kevin Garnett. I'm watching all the guys, right? I'm just a fan. And I start doing sit down interviews with every single Team USA basketball player. I went to the mall with Sharif and I think it was Jason Kidd at the time. And we were just walking around to a music store and I'm shooting behind the scenes of what music they're into. It was unbelievable. And when I started sending videos home back to Los Angeles, I believe my boss was Jed Scott and Adam Bain. And they were like, how did you get access to this? And I said, I stumbled upon this and I took the opportunity and I kept going. And I think that's really, a basis of my career. Sometimes I pinch myself and I go, how the hell did I do the Olympics for 30 days, as a 24-year-old kid? But now I look and I'm like, man, I've done some incredible things. And again, every door was opened by somebody else, but I still had to walk through that door and do a good job. So, I give myself credit, but at the same time, it's an opportunity that was created for me with the connections that I made. And
Bill
it was
Wagner.
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill Wagner is with us, coordinating producer at DIRECTV Sports, overseeing Red Zone Channel. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. And I think that also by you putting yourself out there, like you making that phone call to Steve and you
Right.
going out to that restaurant or wherever you were and you
Yeah.
got to meet the agent, like if you're not putting yourself out there, you're not meeting these people, you're not creating these opportunities for yourself. And so on top of that, I think that you being out there on the front lines has done so much for your career. As somebody who grew up watching these basketball players and then being in Sydney, what was it like for you in the interview chair, and what were you trying to get out of them? How much were you balancing the feeling of being starstruck, but also like, hey, I got to be professional here and I got to
Right.
impress the people at Fox as well?
You're right. I didn't want to keep it straight basketball. I didn't want to say, hey, tonight you're going to be facing fill in the blank team, right? And what are the strengths and weaknesses? I wasn't going to go ESPN angle. Clearly, I'm a kid. Clearly, I'm just having fun doing what I'm doing. So I always broke the ice. What are you doing? How are you having fun in Sydney? Is your family here with you? What do you guys do after there? Do you guys clown on each other? I kept it loose and they loved it. And it opened the door. And it was literally the moment I think it was Ray Allen got up, he just called in the next player. It was like, all right, kid, you're in. And Jason Kidd didn't even know what he was sitting down to. It was just next, next, next. It was almost like I was part of the team media, right? And they just thought I was doing interviews. They didn't even ask, like, hey, who do you work for? I mean, the good news is it was Fox Sports. So it had a backing, but at the same time, they didn't have to do it. They really didn't have to. And I know when I went to spring training in Arizona for foxsports.com, it was hit or miss, right? Some players were great, some managers were hysterical, and then other ones were saying, who do you work for? I'm not going to do it, and walked away. So,
Jeez.
it was one of those things. And I'm not bitter towards them, but at the same time, I haven't forgotten the same players who did it, right? We always remember, but it's really just comes down to it's confidence. I was nervous to do it, but at the same time, if I could have fun with it, they were going to have fun with it, and everybody was comfortable.
Staying under the umbrella of Fox Sports, but then
Mhm.
transitioning to the best damn sports show, period.
Yep.
Speaking of having fun with it, I have a feeling, Bill, you had a lot of fun with that as well. What did that fun look like for you during your time with that venture?
That was amazing. I mean, again, this was, after foxsports.com, I built up a lot of confidence. And then they were starting this show. And at this point, it was Tom Arnold. We're talking John Sally, Michael Irvin, John Kruk. Um, it was just an absolute dream, right? Like I was talking baseball with John Kruk, and he's obviously a Philly guy. So it was nonstop Mets Philly stuff. Michael Irvin couldn't have been nicer. And when you start having fun with these people that you looked up to, and you start seeing how good the show was, and it was ahead of its time. And now I look at Fox Sports One, and I realize if Best Damn had 2 hour block every day on Fox Sports One, it would have been a hit. And unfortunately, we were getting preempted by pregame and postgame of baseball or basketball. Only a half an hour would be in Cincinnati or an hour would be in Los Angeles. It didn't have the right window. And I feel like if it came out now, it would be a lot more popular. But at the same time, working on it, I it I just look at all the people that came from there. Um, from Charlie Uke, who's one of the top dogs at NFL Network, Eric Weinberger, John Entz, who ran Baseball Network, and Weinberger ran NFL, and it goes on and on and on. VPs across the board, and at the time, not all of them were VPs. They were PAs, BAs, feature producers, and there was a lot of talent that came from that show, and a lot of really good friends of mine that we've stayed in touch with. So again, it's a connection industry, but we've never really broken stride on our connections within our circles. And now I'm just proud and look back, and we always joke about it. Whenever we meet up, we're like, man, if that show was on today, it would be huge. And I learned a lot. I really did. Absolutely.
Another big name that came from your time with that show would be Lauren Marcus, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
Absolutely.
How she's been able to grow her career immensely
Yep.
since. But what was it like working with her during those times?
Loved it. She was supportive. She was great at her job. She would hang out with everybody. I mean, we used to hang out before the show, after the show. People would get drinks after work. The camaraderie was amazing. And there was no ill will towards, equals in the show. There was no competitive nature. We were all in it together. We had great line producers. We had a great production staff. And no, Laura was fantastic. Jamie Maggio came from that show. She was fantastic. Matt Schneider, who's now a big dog over at Fox or at NFL Network. Um, I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, Joel Santos, Bernie Kim. I mean, they're all doing really well. And we always joke about it now that, wow, we are all kids and we've grown up with that show and then spread our wings into other areas of the industry.
Part of growing up for you then came to being able to have the opportunity to work with the Dan Patrick Show and
Yep.
play such a formative role with them. You speak about the camaraderie with your team and your group with the Best Damn Sports Show, period. What did that camaraderie and that chemistry look like with you working with Dan and the Danettes?
Well, it was funny. When I went over, again, it was Eric Shanks, who, another mentor of mine. He was going over to DirecTV at the time because News Corp had bought DirecTV from Hughes. And he said, Wagner, we'd love to have you over there. So we started doing a show called The Sports Mix, which was like a mosaic. We had on-air talent telling you what's on. And that was my first opportunity as a line producer, right? So I'm in my late 20s. I'm actually building out rundowns and copy and scripts. And from there, I'm just loving life. It was a great atmosphere. I mean, DirecTV is a fantastic company to work for. And then my boss, Chris Long, and James Crittenden, they met with Dan Patrick and they put together, hey, we're going to turn your radio show into a TV show because they're goofy, they're fun, they're knowledgeable, and it could work. And it was going to be basically, it's a radio show first, but on TV behind the scenes. And everything was great about it except for the time zone. So it was an East Coast
Yes.
radio show, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, which meant we had to be at work between 4 and 4:30 Pacific, which means we're getting up at 3:30. So shout out to my wife for dealing with that schedule for 12 years. But no, it was amazing. I mean, when you get up that early, it's like a second family. From everybody in the control room, video team, graphics, it was just everybody knew each other so well. When you're moody, when you're in a good mood, after grabbing lunch, it was like a second family, especially with those hours. And I started doing graphics, overseeing graphics for that show. And then eventually I took over as the line producer, coordinating producer. I couldn't ask for a better situation. And that goes for everybody from the technical staff, but really the Milford team, could have been, we're over here, you're over there, let us do our job.
Sure.
And it was not like that. So Paul Pabst, Todd Fritz, Stephen O'Connor and Andrew Perloff, and then obviously not to mention Dan Patrick, I consider them all really good friends. We're no longer doing it. AT&T, got out of the entertainment business when it came to original programming, but I'm still watching the show as a fan. I still love the show. I'm not waking up at 3:30 in the morning anymore, but I still love the show. And it's one of those things that when we started, it was, how do we create content that's actually interesting besides just people standing at a microphone? We had look-ins, we kind of created content features, and it just became a huge hit. And every Super Bowl, we would be down on the Super Bowl site, and these guys were like stars. We'd walk into a Buffalo Wild Wings and everybody's taking a picture with Dan and the Danettes. they wanted pictures with me, and I'm like, you don't even know me. So, it was awesome, and I'm proud of it, and I still have swag that I wear with pride. An absolute great opportunity, and I absolutely love all the guys on the show. So we still do the Red Zone in Los Angeles, but and a lot of the production staff worked on Dan Patrick as well, and we still talk about, can you believe Dan said this? And we don't even work on the show anymore, but we all watch it. So we're fans.
Bill Wagner, we're also a fan of you, coordinating producer at DIRECTV Sports. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. So we're going to touch on that red zone experience that you're a part of in just a moment.
Yep.
But one of the names that you brought up that you worked with on the Dan Patrick Show, who has been on this podcast with me, is Todd Fritz. And Todd Fritz is such an awesome guy. I'm curious if you have a fun story about Todd or some memory that you recall that comes to mind when you think of an interaction you had with him on a show, or just what your friendship with him looks like.
It's funny because we just talk kids, right? Like, he's an incredible father, and his son Jordan's now at Syracuse, and we've all grown up together, and that's how we know we're all getting old, is through the kids. But Fritzy is the same person on the show as he is off the show. He's funny, he's neurotic, and he's a genuinely absolute, nice, perfect, caring person that you would actually just want to talk to and hang out with and have lunch with. There's no showboating about him. And I guess a funny story would be, we were in New Orleans and we're trying to find our way back to the hotel. And this is before smartphones were in full, everyone had one. So Fritzy had a BlackBerry, and he was trying to explain where the hotel was because he was talent and I was not at the time. I was just staff. So he was in a different hotel. He couldn't figure out how to get back. He couldn't do the navigation system, and he just couldn't figure out the technology aspect. And he started melting down. So we finally had to ask a few people and ask, like, how do we get back to, fill in the blank hotel? And we got him back. And it was just a funny story. Like, when we talk in the morning, we're like, oh my God, that was unbelievable. But, like, he to me is one of the most genuine people I know. And I'm so happy for him. His family is incredible. They were out in Los Angeles. His wife and his two younger children, much older than my children now, they came by when I had my twins, and they just came by, brought a gift, wanted to say hello. It's really special. That shows friendship more so than just a text that says congratulations with your twins. So Fritzy's an amazing person.
Friendship turned family, it sounds like, when you hear
absolutely.
about the bonds that were created during that experience, and then the bonds that were created and are created during your Red Zone channel experience now. And what does it look like as Bill Wagner during an NFL football Sunday? I want to live in your headspace in what you're doing. What is on your mind during the production? What does that look like?
Well, it's stressful, but we've been doing it for so long. We have a lot of veterans, right? Our control room is a bunch of veterans. Obviously, Andrew Siciliano is an incredible talent person, and we can just have a conversation. And it's one of those, we have 9 games early, 4 games late. Here are our sponsors. He's like, got it, got it, got it. Here's how we're going to go stack the games on our on air, which is only 7 minutes, which when you try to promote, 9 early games, 4 late games with warm-ups, and saying hello in 7 minutes, you got to pick and choose your timings and try to make air because you want to make the kickoffs.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, we do 2 rehearsals, one at 9:20, one at 9:40, just to get the timing of the show down. And then we're live at 9:55. Wow. And once it's kicked off, throw your rundowns in the garbage besides half times, because there's no rhyme or reason. It's, if there's 4 games in the red zone, we're going. If there's, we've had 5 touchdowns simultaneously. Next game, all just timing perfectly. Someone could say, you did a great job, Bill. No, I didn't. Chicago scored the touchdown. The Jets scored a touchdown. Probably not currently, but if it would be like one of those amazing moments that it just happens and everyone's excited. Andrew's excited that we hit them all in stride. Perfect. So it's weird, right? It's like, I'm the remote control. I'm the one changing the channels. And Andrew is my, mouthpiece, and he jumps in and says, Bill, maybe we should do this. And I said, that's a great call. Let's do it. So it's an absolute team, but it's funny because it's when we're bouncing from game to game. Updates, you got to pause on an update because they're reviewing a play, or there's a flag. Don't jump out of it yet. It's not a touchdown just yet. So it took a lot of time because it's a long day. It's 7 hours. There's no commercials, and our show is as good as the games on TV. But we're going to keep it entertaining. When there's nothing there, we'll show a highlight. We'll show some fantasy. We'll bring Andrew on camera and have some fun. And his quirky personality, he has fun with the fans. The fans absolutely love him on Twitter. So it's one of those things. When I tell people what I do, I'm not only proud of what I do, but just the glow of their facial expression is, I've watched Red Zone for 10 years. You're part of my family every Sunday. And that is really, really cool because there's nothing worse than doing a show that people say, what channel is it on? What is it like? And if everyone knows your show, you've done something right.
Following a show and sort of when you're doing a look back at what you did and what
Mhm.
Andrew did and what your whole team did,
Yep.
where do you take the most pride from it? Like when you break down mentally what you just witnessed and all the hours and all the chaos and all the fun and all the
Right.
quirkiness, to you, where does the pride come from?
It's just the timings. I can't control the action, but if I have a really good show open and my half times are tight and the graphics and the video does a great job, it's one of those teamwork kind of mentalities. And I watch back the shows because I'm a nerd. So on Mondays, I will watch back
Wow.
7 hours, and I just want to see how the chaos worked. Because in the control rooms, sometimes you think, oh man, we missed that, or I can't believe we missed that 40-yarder from Tyreek Hill, even though in theory they weren't in the red zone and we could have gone there and it could have been a 2-yard run. But when you actually watch it back and you're frustrated during a Sunday of what could have done better, and then you watch it on TV and you go, nobody would even know
Yeah.
that we were out of our minds in the control room. But we're all fans, right? So I'm a Jets fan, unfortunately. So I kind of tune the Jets out a little bit. But the guy next to me might be a Giants fan, and we have a Cowboys fan and an Eagles fan. Andrew is an absolute nut when it comes to the Browns. So even though we're trying to be impartial, we're still keeping our eye on our own teams, right? So we're still football fans, even though it's work. So I just look at the red zone as one of those amazing inventions. And it was all started with Eric Shanks. He mimicked it off of B Sky B with the soccer, and they had something like that. And because NFL Sunday Ticket was on DirecTV when he slid over, he had the idea that what if we can do something where we have all the games on at one time and one channel navigates everything. But at the time, since he was coming from Fox Sports, we can get the Fox Sports games in there. We couldn't do CBS. So where James Cridman, who was the original line producer of the show, he would just do Fox games live and then do CBS as updates only. And then eventually the NFL gave us permission to do all of the action.
Wow.
And that really changed everything. And then NFL Network created their own version of Red Zone. We created a Strike Zone channel, which we had for about 3 or 4 years, which was just an absolute pleasure. I'm a huge baseball fan. And then MLB Network took it over and they have their own Strike Zone. So I think that's one of those inventions that kind of changed the sports landscape. I mean, jumping in from game to game where the action dictates is something that, even though it seems like common sense, somebody had to create it, and Eric Shanks created it.
Bill Wagner is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. I got one more question for you.
Sure.
Speaking of changing the sports landscape, I think you would fit in that category of being a vessel in
Mhm.
doing that. When you consider everything that you've done in all your years in the business, what are you most surprised about yourself and what you've done?
I would say it's a good question. I guess the more social I got. I was a shy kid, and I think when I started with the student radio station in Arizona, and I would have to get up in front of everybody as sports director, right? So it's an auditorium. It's like a college style auditorium, and I would actually get in front of everybody, and there'd be 100 kids, 150 kids, and I'm breaking down the Arizona Wildcats basketball game. And I used to shake like out of control
Wow.
in high school trying to get up in front of the class and speak. That was just something I couldn't do. I hated doing it. And after I did that in college, I lost the nerves. And I think that is something that really changed how I was as a producer, because you still have to get in front of your staff, you still have to get in front of on air talent. It just changed who I was. So I think I'm more surprised, the shy kid in a shell, um, as a kid, that I turned into somebody who's very comfortable speaking in front of others now. And I'm not shy anymore. I'm like, if they're going to ask me to speak, that's a good thing. And they really want to hear me speak. Why am I nervous? So, and I tell my kids that too. I don't know if it always works, right? I mean, kids are going to get shy anyway, but it's one of those things that changed who I was. And I think that's where being the sports director at University of Arizona really changed my whole landscape. But it, nothing would have happened without that phone call that we talked about. Nothing would have happened without connections that were created. And you see it all the time, especially in big, corporations, where somebody gets an opportunity because they're the nephew or a son or whatever, and gets a foot in the door with an internship. Some of them bust their butts and make a name for themselves without, the family's help. And other ones get the door open and the door shuts right away because they don't do the work. So even if you get an opportunity, you still have to put in the time, work hard. And I've always been that guy that put in extra time, whether I was getting paid or not, and it paid off. It ended up being jobs. So that was the big key.
Well, you have everything. You've got the talent, you've got the hard work. You created your own connections, like you said, because
Yep.
nothing fell in your lap, which actually I think makes you want it more, right? When
Right.
it's not given to you, and the ways in which you went out there to put yourself out there, knowing that when you called Steve, like you said, you don't know
Yep.
what sort of reaction he's going to have, or if he's going to, like you said, hang up on you, or say he'll call you
Right.
back and never do. Who knows what Bill Wagner, where he is, what he's doing
Yep.
without Steve Cohen. And I want people, and like you discussed as well, I want people to
Yep.
realize just how powerful that phone call was, and how Steve did not have to do that.
Nope.
And by him doing that, that gesture of kindness has has had a trampoline effect for you and brought you here.
Yep.
And so what I love so much about you, Bill, is that you saw that, and now you are playing the role of Steve Cohen in the lives of younger folks who are also trying to make it in the business. And I want everybody to know that about you, because they see
Thank
what
you.
you do as far as your work, but they also need to know all that you do to help build up this next generation, given that you had somebody and multiple people in your corner as well. Bill Wagner, coordinating the producer at DIRECTV Sports with Red Zone Channel. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Bill, I'm moved. I'm so thrilled for this conversation that we got to have, and I can't wait for people to see it, because a lot of people are going to be inspired. And thank you for giving me the platform to tell your story. It really means a lot.
Well, I appreciate it too, and I couldn't ask for a better opportunity. So thank you, Brian, and I'll leave it with absolutely pay it forward. Somebody gave you an opportunity, you give them an opportunity. That is key.